Jeffrey Epstein, President Donald Trump, Ghislaine Maxwell and Prince Andrew. We have got so much to get through in today's episode. This is Fame Under Fire from BBC Sounds with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. When celebrities, sports stars, politicians, influencers and royalty find themselves in the firing line, whether it's a lawsuit or a scandal, we are here to pre-bunk, debunk, myth-bust, fact-check, interrogate and of course answer your questions. You can send them to me on social media or you can WhatsApp us at +44 330 678 114. That's +44 330 678 114. Don't forget to subscribe to the BBC Sounds YouTube channel so you never miss a thing. 6 years after his death, paedophile and sex trafficker Jeffrey Epstein is still posing a massive problem for the British royal family and President Donald Trump.
The people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn, either by him or because of him, were actually very useful. He himself, not as it were as close as you might think. We weren't that close.
I sit down with a royal historian whose new book claims to uncover just how close the Duke of York, that's Prince Andrew, really was with the disgraced financier. And Shaun is back, telling us how he thinks Ghislaine Maxwell is after a big decision from President Trump. Essentially, pardon me, please.
It's to be assumed one of the things she requested is, get me out of this awful facility that I am, take me to this low-risk facility in Texas so I can have a better time. It is my belief the reason that they're doing this so publicly, so loud, making statements on why she's doing this, is she's trying to angle for a presidential pardon.
But first, this brand new book. It's called Entitled, The Rise and Fall of the House of York. It took 4 years to write, and its author, Andrew Lownie, said he conducted hundreds of interviews while researching it. But if you don't quite remember who the Duke of York, that's Prince Andrew, is, it's hardly like he's turning up at every social function these days. Here's a quick refresher.
This is Richard Dimbleby from Buckingham Palace. We've just had news officially that Her Majesty the Queen has just been delivered of a boy.
The Prince was just 19 when he signed up for a 12-year commission and trained at Dartmouth Naval College. And in 1981, he was awarded his wings by his father, along with the award for top pilot.
Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson are said to be delighted with the title, which is the personal gift of the Queen and is usually reserved for the sovereign's second son. The most famous Duke of York will look down on the newly created Duke and Duchess of York as they drive back from their wedding past his column overlooking the Mall.
We're getting reports that a woman has filed a lawsuit against Prince Andrew in the United States, accusing him of sexually abusing her.
Prince Andrew has emphatically denied all of the allegations against him.
Your Royal Highness, we've come to Buckingham Palace in highly unusual circumstances. Normally, we'd be discussing your work, but today, you've chosen to speak out for the first time.
Buckingham Palace has announced that Prince Andrew is returning his royal and military titles to the Queen and will no longer be referred to as His Royal Highness in any official capacity. Buckingham Palace says he will now defend himself as a private citizen.
Andrew Lownie is with me now. Hi, Andrew.
Hi.
Now, it might feel a little bit weird for you to do a recap of who Prince Andrew is, but considering my best friend's little brother thought that he was married to Fergie from the Black Eyed Peas, I think it's fair to say that for younger people, they perhaps only know him through his association with Epstein. So who was Prince Andrew before what you term in the book the downfall?
Well, he's the second son of the late Queen, born in 1960, very popular during the Falklands War in which he served, and was conducting really royal duties in the way that his siblings were. So he served in the Falklands in 1982. His career in the Navy went on till 2000. And then he became basically a trade representative for Britain to promote British trade.
As we can hear, the book focuses heavily on Prince Andrew. We asked the palace and his team for a response to the book in general. Buckingham Palace said, as the Duke of York is not a working member of the royal family, we would not speak for him. We would not comment on this matter. The Prince's team has not responded yet. You spend some time putting forward the idea that he was an abusive boss who shouts at his staff for things like cutting up his meat wrong, an easily led individual who you quote one diplomat referring to as a bit thick and boring, and someone devoid of purpose. You reference a friend of his ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, calling him a poor judge of character, easily impressed, and characterised him as going from a couch potato to a man about town with nothing better to go on one holiday to the next. But you also spend a fair amount of time fleshing out this image of him as the Playboy Prince. Now, if you said to me, I'm 24, I was born in 2000. If you said to me, Playboy Prince, I think Prince Harry. Talk to me about the Playboy Prince as Prince Andrew. What do you mean by that?
Well, there are a lot of parallels with Harry, and the service career. But the Playboy Prince, he was called his royal heartthrob. He was very good looking. Someone said he looked like Robert Redford. He was very charming and charismatic. He was a sort of poster boy of the royal family. Charles was seen as someone with big ears who was a little bit sort of gauche. Andrew was very flamboyant, confident, a sportsman, a real macho man. And I think he himself thought that he would make a better king than Charles. So that was the image.
But the perception of him as a Playboy Prince, it wasn't PR created. He really was out there shaking a leg in the clubs. I mean, the reference to him in China White dancing with Paris Hilton is just, I mean, he was putting some time behind cultivating this image as well. Yeah,
this was very much his midlife crisis. It said that he slept with over 1,000 women, but exactly, he was a regular at Tramp and at China White. And people kind of felt this is a bit weird for a man who with teenage children, age 40, to be doing this. But, lots of men have midlife crises.
And photos of him sunbathing on yachts with topless models and things like that. I mean, this might be quite shocking to people who, 16, 17 years old, the scandals with the royals, they might think of Megxit. They wouldn't necessarily imagine that this is what had taken place beforehand.
Exactly. I mean, it shows you that in some ways, that there are always scandals in the royal family and they weather them. So, there was clearly a lot of publicity about this, about the sort of people he was mixing with. Some of them were into drugs. Certainly a lot of them were very promiscuous. Some of them had been to prison. But I think the concern also was that he was mixing with a lot of very dodgy businessmen and despots, people who were putting political prisoners into prison, who didn't have free elections, not the sort of people that really sent out the right image for a member of the royal family.
But as part of your interrogation of this image of him as a Playboy Prince, and like you said there, Randy Andy, and these kind of versions of him that they saw in the press, you also look at his sex life in great detail. But you look at the prince's first sexual experience, which one of your sources told you was at age 11 when he lost his virginity after a father of one of his friends arranged for an escort to come and meet the two boys in a West End hotel. Your source likens this to a form of sexual abuse. Now that is extremely serious. Did you consider whether Andrew was entitled to anonymity about this allegation? And did you approach him to get a waiver for this anonymity?
Well, I took the view of putting everything I found in, and then I thought I would leave it to the editors or the lawyers at my publisher to cut. I didn't really want to self-censor. And for me, it seemed quite an important thing in terms of explaining his later behaviour. I think it presented him in a slightly more sympathetic light. It was a reliable source, and I left it there for them to decide. And if they wanted to take it out, of course, I would have agreed. But you're right. I mean, he is entitled to a private life, and there were a lot of things that we took out connected with his private life that are not in the book.
And were people very forthcoming about some of the more intimate details about his life?
Yes. I mean, this is where I got the material, talking to people. I mean, there aren't documents about it. It's people talking, and these are her friends, girlfriends, people like that. Yeah.
And we're going to get into the relationship with Epstein, but when we look at this alleged experience of losing his virginity, it paints him as sort of a tragic figure as well.
Yeah, it is. And I begin the book by saying it is a tragic comedy, really. There is some sympathy there. And some of his behaviour is so bizarre that it's not normal behaviour.
And the relationship between Prince Andrew, Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell weaves in and out of this book. You get sort of a through line of their friendship. It comes in, it comes out, and you focus on it in great detail in some parts of the book. Jeffrey Epstein died in prison in 2019 as he awaited his trial on sex trafficking charges. It came more than a decade after his conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor, for which he was a registered sex offender. This time, the former financier was accused of running a vast network of underage girls for sex, and he pled not guilty. In 2022, his former partner, Ghislaine Maxwell, was sentenced to 20 years in prison for helping Epstein abuse young girls. Here's Prince Andrew speaking to the BBC's Newsnight programme in 2019 about his relationship with Epstein.
Well, I met through his girlfriend back in 1999, and I'd known her since she was at university in the UK. And it would be, to some extent, a stretch to say that as it were, we were close friends. I mean, we were friends because of other people. And I had a lot of opportunity to go to the United States. But I didn't have much time with him. I suppose I saw him once or twice a year, perhaps maybe maximum of 3 times a year.
In your book, you tell a different story about when the pair first met. Now, you say that they met in the early 90s. What is your evidence for saying that?
Well, 2 things. One is his own private secretary, Alistair Watson, writing to the Times, saying that he met in the early 1990s, and a man called Steve Hoffenberg, who was a great associate of Epstein. In fact, he did a Ponzi scheme with him and went to prison for 18 years, and he actually put it down to the date of 1991. I think the other thing that's shocking is that they claim to have, both of them, to have cut off contact with Epstein after 2010, and yet we have legal depositions in court cases where they're in contact and meeting in 2011.
So I've seen that letter from Alistair Watson and I've seen the flight logs, and it does reflect a longer relationship between the two. But you also go some way in fleshing out, picking apart that idea that they didn't see each other much, because you talk about them waiting to board a jet in 1999 with Epstein. You say there was a dinner party in April held in Manhattan in Jeffrey Epstein's home in the same year. In May, you say Prince Andrew went to his Caribbean residence.
Yes, he had his own protection officer said that he stayed so often with Epstein in New York that his bedroom was called the Britannia Suite. There's a woman called Deborah Gale, who's the housekeeper in Palm Beach, which is one of Epstein's houses, who said that Andrew was a regular visitor. I don't think there's any doubt that Andrew saw him a lot, and as some of these legal depositions have come out, we've been more aware of just how close he was to Epstein in terms of their business arrangements.
So he's seeing him a lot. Do you think Prince Andrew was in denial about Epstein?
Well, they're all trying to distance themselves from Epstein. So Trump, as we all know, is saying that he hardly knew Epstein when they were best buddies for 10 years. Trump says that he had never met Andrew when there are countless photographs of the two of them together. And I've got accounts in the book of them talking about money and golf and women. So I'm afraid all these powerful men, when they sort of realize that they may be in trouble, they just begin to tell porky pies.
Some people might say, Epstein is dead, Ghislaine Maxwell is in jail, Prince Andrew's reputation is cemented, particularly after the BBC Newsnight interview he did, which lots of people said was absolutely disastrous and pointed to him being guilty actually was worse for his public relations. Why write this book? Because you're not coming with, I've found something that can lead to a criminal investigation or radically change our perception of Prince Andrew. So why do this?
Well, I'm a biographer. He's an interesting subject to write about. I would disagree with you. And we now have the palace beginning to address questions like whether he should lose his title. So I do think I've moved the dial just in terms of book, which is rare for a biography. But, you don't write biographies just to do a hatchet job. I wrote it because I was interested in a whole series of questions. But 300 people, that's new material.
And you speak about, in the book, about perhaps more transparency being needed on the part of the royals. Is that something you're calling for with this as well, declaring their business interests and releasing information about where Andrew was at specific times?
Well, I've been calling for more transparency about royal matters for a long time, particularly with archives, which they are all closed, with the fact that they're exempt from the Freedom of Information Act, that there's no parliamentary scrutiny of them. MPs 20 years ago were calling for a royal register, like a parliamentary register, to show what business activities they had going. Not so much for the principal players, but for the sort of more minor players like Andrew and Fergie. But also, they were calling MPs 20 years ago for the National Crime Agency to investigate Andrew. And I have suggested that might be something they should look at again. And I've certainly got information which I wasn't able to put in the book for legal reasons, which I would be happy to pass to the NSCA. And also, we've had the Met claiming that they've looked at the case with Virginia Jeffrey and sex trafficking 3 times, and there was nothing to see there. Well, people, including the former head of Royal Security, Di Davis, have been pushing to say, I think there is a case here for them to investigate. He may be completely innocent, as he says, but I think there should be an investigation. So, yeah, I think there are some big questions that they need to answer.
Are you a royalist?
Yes, I am.
You believe in the royal family, you like what they stand for.
Absolutely, and it's because I believe I'm a monarchist that I feel they should hold themselves to higher standards. These people are undermining the good work that's done by others, the king, the Princess Royal and others. And no one in this country should be above the law.
He hasn't had criminal charges brought against him. In many ways, he has been pushed out of the public eye, and his reputation is not very good. So what more are you calling for? You want him to be detitled?
I'm not calling for him to be detitled. I think there's a feeling that something needs to be done. There's the public anger, if you look at the comments at the moment, suggests that, they feel that he's got away with a lot. I mean, there's no hatchet job here. I started off wanting to cooperate with him, wanting to write a biography which could be as fair and balanced as possible. But, it's difficult if they say to all their friends not to talk to me. Clearly, the material I'm gathering will not necessarily be from people who are positive. There is some positive stuff in here. I think I'm pretty fair to him over his time in the Falklands. I can see he did some good work. So, I think in any democracy, we should be able to criticise the rich and powerful, and they shouldn't just be protected just because they're rich and powerful.
And like I said earlier, we asked the Palace and Andrew's team about the book. Buckingham Palace sent us this response. The Duke of York is not a working member of the royal family. We would not speak for him, and we would not comment on this matter. You went to him originally. What was the response that you got from him?
Well, I had a meeting with Sarah Ferguson, who was sort of representing the two of them, saying I would like to work with them. My initial impression after the end of the meeting, and we had another meeting with her PR people, who I think also acted for Andrew, was that they were prepared to discuss this, and then they decided at that point that they didn't want to do it. So I tried as hard as I could to give them an opportunity to put their perspective.
And throughout this book, there is a repeated idea from some of your sources that Prince Andrew was manipulated by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, used for his access to high society. One person saying, he's so innocent and naive that he doesn't realise that they have ulterior motives. But you have Epstein's housekeeper, who you've spoken about, Deborah Gale, describing paying girls that left the prince's bedroom with wads of cash left by Jeffrey Epstein. One perception, he's an easily led fool, essentially. Others, he's actively engaged in a seedy lifestyle where his sexual appetite is being served by Jeffrey Epstein. That's two very different views of him. You spent 4 years writing this and researching this. What perception do you have of him?
Well, people are very complex, and they present themselves in different ways to different people. People talk about Andrew being incredibly well-mannered, and yet, the book has lots and lots of stories of him being rude and abusive to staff, and to all sorts of people he comes into contact with. So, what I try to do is present a mosaic of impressions to leave people to make up their own mind.
Another person you focus on during the book is President Donald Trump. Now, you've chosen to title the book, entitled The Rise and Fall of the House of York, not The Rise and Fall of the House of York and Trump. So why focus on him?
Well, people are interested in the relationship with Trump. It is part of the story. In some ways, I'm not writing in a vacuum. I'm writing for a market. And if people want to know more about the relationship with Trump, then I should provide that.
And his relationship with Epstein as well. You touch on that, Trump and Epstein.
Trump and Epstein is very well documented, not just in my book, but in lots of books. And people like Michael Wolff have written extensively about it and talked about it. So I'm not saying anything new, but clearly there were slightly different perspectives I got through my sources, yes.
Andrew, thank you so much for talking to me today.
It's been a pleasure.
Well, this story isn't going anywhere for Trump. It just seems to be getting bigger and bigger. On the 11th of August, it was announced that a judge had ruled that the grand jury transcripts relating to Ghislaine Maxwell would not be made public after the DOJ asked for them to be released. I have a fair few questions. Joining me now with the answers is our resident criminal defense attorney, Shaun Kent, joining us from South Carolina. Hi, Shaun.
Hey, Anoushka, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. But I've got a lot of questions about this. First of all, what exactly would the grand jury transcripts actually be?
If you remember back with the Diddy case, our grand jury is basically like an investigative body. So what ended up happening, prosecutors go in front of this grand jury, these group of individuals, and they bring facts to them. They help them make a decision whether or not a case should be indicted, or if a case should be brought forth, or should somebody have to stand trial. Grand jury information is notoriously private. The Department of Justice went to a judge and they said, we want this grand jury information released. The judge then went and re-listened to the grand jury testimony. What was actually very wild is he said, I've looked at all of this stuff. there's nothing in here. There weren't really any witnesses, no really eyewitnesses, nothing that's going to trigger some new crimes. And he said something very interesting. He said, if I do release this and the public at whole sees that there's nothing in there anymore, this could just be seen as a diversion. He didn't say a diversion of what, but he said, if I'm just releasing information and the public reads this grand jury testimony that's supposed to be private and there's nothing there, this is a diversion. So I thought that was a really interesting word because he didn't say diversion from somebody, but this could just be all trying to create some type of diversion.
Yeah, but the thing that confuses me is the Department of Justice came to the judge and asked for the transcripts to be released, and the judge has said no. But aren't the Department of Justice technically in charge?
And that's what's crazy. So people get confused on who and what the Department of Justice is. The Department of Justice actually just used to be called the Office of the Attorney General. So who is the Attorney General? The Attorney General is the attorney for the United States of America, for the federal body. But what's really interesting is the Attorney General is an appointed cabinet position. It is appointed by Donald Trump. So not to do a old government class, but we have three bodies of government in the United States. We have the executive, we have the judicial, and we have the legislative. Those are three separate bodies that are supposed to be distinct and separate to create a balance, a checks and balances, if you will. So we have the judicial branch, and the job of the judicial branch is to make sure that we're doing laws the correct way. The executive branch is to enforce the law. So the Department of Justice is just an arm of individuals, just an arm of people who are basically prosecutors. The thing that's weird is I don't want to say they work for the president because they're supposed to be an independent arm, but they're basically under the guise of the president because he's their boss. He's the one who appoints them. So even though they're supposed to be neutral and detached, there's a real argument to be made that they are just carrying out the whims and the controls of our president since he's their boss. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it answers it, but it's still very confusing. Why would they want these transcripts released in the first place?
And that's one of the things, that's why we brought that up, is they're answering the whims of their boss. And so you have a president who's just like, the public at whole is saying, and these are assumptions, but that you have a president out there saying people are asking about this Maxwell interview, these Epstein's interview. So you guys release them because they're going to help my political agenda. And that's where people are having a problem. It's like, what's the point of releasing this stuff if it does not promote or show justice? And that's what the judge stepped in and said. And the judge said, no, I'm not releasing this just because Department of Justice, your boss, wants this stuff released, because this could just be you guys trying to create a diversion so people aren't looking at something else. There's nothing through the ends of justice, nothing that'll promote justice, which will justify me releasing this private grand jury information. Because he even said the following: don't forget, Ghislaine Maxwell went on trial. So anything that was important about her case that the grand jury had was public and was made at the trial. So everybody already knows about that. So that's like the judge is saying, what else do you need this information for? We simply don't release grand jury information just because a sitting president or the Department of Justice wants it.
So releasing those transcripts speaks to the idea of transparency that Donald Trump is trying to further in the wake of the Epstein backlash, where he said, I'm not going to release the files. But another thing that he's done that's caused a major issue is moving Ghislaine Maxwell, who is a co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein's, who's a paedophile and a sex trafficker, from a jail in Florida to a jail in Texas. But that's a minimal security jail. Now, Shaun, forgive me, but my understanding of these jails comes from films where they're shown sort of playing tennis on the lawn and drinking cocktails after 4. How far is that from the truth? Or how much does it improve your quality of life?
Yes and no. It really does depend on the facility. And first, I want to make this clear. Technically, it's not Donald Trump moving this inmate. It's the Department of Justice. Even though I know exactly what I said on who's the boss of the Department of Justice, technically it's the Department of Justice moving somebody. Now, given the fact that she is convicted of sex trafficking, which is a crime of violence, usually she should be in a high-risk violent facility. The higher secure the facility, the worse the facility, the worse the conditions is usually the rule of thumb. She's been transferred to a minimum secure facility. And in those facilities, you are right, they're allowed to engage in sports activities. They're allowed to get jobs. They have better opportunities, because the reason we have these people in these minimum secure facilities is what we're saying is we are transitioning you to the point that you can go back into the public at all. What's wild about this, Anoushka, is I've had a lot of people who have cooperated with the government. It's called a Rule 35. After you have been convicted, you sit down with the government, you try to give information because you want your time cut. Usually, you don't publicize this. You don't let the world know. You don't want anyone to know. It has been so public that she has cooperated. It is so public. And when you cooperate, you get things. And it's to be assumed one of the things she requested is, get me out of this awful facility that I am, take me to this low-risk facility in Texas so I can have a better time. It is my belief the reason that they're doing this so publicly, so loud, making statements on why she's doing this, is she's trying to angle for a presidential pardon. Because normally, when we have people who are cooperating, which we do, we've represented a lot of people who have cooperated against other individuals, you don't want the world to know. Why don't you want the world to know? Because they're going to be in a facility with a lot of inmates who now know you are a snitch. And when they know that you are a snitch, you could be at harm's way. So it is wild. This does not happen, that she is so publicly, and her lawyers are so publicly telling the world, I'm a snitch, guys. I'll tell on anybody, to the point that I clearly have told on people, because I used to be in a high-risk facility and now I'm in a low-risk facility.
So the BBC contacted the White House for a comment on Maxwell's move, and they confirmed that she has been moved to a federal prison camp in Bryan. Her attorney, David Oscar Marcus, confirmed the transfer but declined further comment. Now, in a statement from the family of the late Virginia Jeffery, that's one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, they expressed their horror and disgust at what they described as the preferential treatment given to Maxwell, and they further condemned the move as having been made without any notification to Maxwell's victims. Now, you spoke about this as kind of a lead into a presidential pardon, and if you listen to Diddy on Trial, we covered this tons of times. Presidential pardons often happen. Every president does it. They can pardon who they like for what they like. But my question is, Ghislaine Maxwell is a convicted co-conspirator of a paedophile and sex trafficker, Jeffrey Epstein. She was helping him abuse young girls. If President Trump chooses to pardon her, does that set a precedent in other cases? Say if you were representing a client who was accused of the same thing, could they say, well, Ghislaine Maxwell's just been pardoned by the president, I should be acquitted?
The long answer is no. And here's why. Presidents have used the pardon power at their will for generations. It's just what a president can do. There is no rhyme or reason. He does not have to ask permission. If it is a federal crime that you have been convicted of and the president wants to give you a pardon, he can. It is usually somebody who pardons, the president usually pardons people who have looked out for him. So if you look at the two, actually we can go with three separate examples. First, you start with our former president, Joe Biden. He pardoned his son. Now, other individuals could say, why don't you pardon me? I have tax issues. I have gun issues. Joe Biden's like, I don't have to. That's my son. I'm going to pardon him. You go to next step forward, and then you go with the Chrisleys. Todd Chrisley and his wife were convicted of basically bilking banks and scams of this nature, but their daughter, because of her social media presence and her prowess, was a big Trump supporter during the election. And then afterwards, she went to him and said, pardon my parents. And guess what? Donald Trump said, you helped me. So then they got the pardon. And then you go to the most high profile one that we're hearing about all the time, Sean Puff Daddy Combs. Sean Combs' lawyers have flat out said, we have reached out to President Trump because we want a pardon. And if you notice, Donald Trump's response back was, hey, we used to be friends. We're not friends anymore. He doesn't like me very much. I have a problem with this. And he is talking about the fact that literally Sean Combs said nasty stuff about him during the election, and for this reason, he's probably not considering a pardon. So if you see, these presidents use these for personal reasons. And so just because somebody else has used it, that doesn't work. There's not a legal basis. There's not a logical basis. There's not case law that determines it. It's just the president says, I want to pardon you because you've been convicted of a federal crime. And all presidents do it. Whether it's Obama, whether it's Biden, whether it's Trump, whether it's Jimmy Carter, all presidents do it.
Yeah, it's just such a weird concept that if you like somebody, that you can just pardon them.
All the legal analysis, all the constitutional, it has nothing to do but friendships.
Shaun, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. That was our resident criminal defense attorney, Shaun Kent, joining us from South Carolina.
This could happen to any woman, and it is happening to 1 in 5 women. And that's really scary. I was hacked, stalked, harassed, and impersonated. It was a period of absolute hell for me. The story kicks off at a very glamorous London Fashion Week setting. I was getting the coffee.
But you were hanging out in this very, very glamorous kind of environment, right?
Yeah, I was living the dream. I was clueless and innocent, and it was in this very glamorous London Fashion Week setting where I was an intern having the time of my life that I met a man who is actually at the centre of this story.
And that's it for this episode of Fame Under Fire from BBC Sounds with me, Anoushka Mutanda-Dougherty. Don't forget to subscribe to the BBC Sounds YouTube channel so you never miss a thing, and keep sending us your suggestions for topics and your questions. You can send them to me on social media, or you can get us on WhatsApp at +44 330 678 1114.